Hello and welcome to the couch of discussion, which is a little something that I've been meaning to do for some time, apart from redress the office because it's been quite tight over there by the window. So we've got a bit more space to play with here and a bit more comfort, which is rather nice and gives me an opportunity to lounge and explore topics that maybe I haven't touched on before or have touched on before but in brief discussion. One of which is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise has a new movie out. I don't know whether you've heard about it. They've kept it rather under the radar. But Top Gun 2, I forget what else it's called, but it's known as Top Gun 2, must be the longest awaited sequel ever. What is it, 30 years between a movie and it's a sequel? So there's a whole bunch of bits and pieces going on. There's a lot of controversy in regards to casting and various other bits and pieces, but that's out of the hands of the action department. And so what I thought I would do is touch on some of Tom Cruise's work, primarily because of an argument that has taken place, 20 years, 25 years, about Tom, what's the word I'm looking for? The sentiment, the word, the phrasing that's used in newspapers, magazines, online is Tom Cruise doing his own stunts. Now, very clearly, he does do a huge amount of action, particularly of late. And when I say particularly of late, I mean Jack Reacher onward. Certainly, I think that's probably the best scenario. He's allowed to do a great deal more, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But it's very interesting to me, as a fan of the industry, that the only time stunts are brought up in conversation is often in regards to somebody else doing them, as far as the press or media is concerned. And the one thing to remember with Tom Cruise, he's made 49 movies since 1981, which is a fair batting average by any state of the imagination. Majority of them action-based. And on the strength of that, he would have been doubled, and has been doubled, on pretty much every picture. Because in those early days, young, very big at the box office, nobody wants to injure the star. You injure the star, you shut down the production. That's happened on a number of occasions with other actors. And so, you take as many precautions as you possibly can. One of his first action pictures, or pictures that he took an active role in from an action perspective, was Legend. Back in 1985, Vic Armstrong has one of the great credits in that picture, apart from stunt coordinator. He's down as a unicorn master. You don't get that every day of the week, do you? You're no longer a horse master, you're a unicorn master. You're looking after the unicorns. And there's a number of action moments in there where Tom's character needs to go above and beyond the call of duty, and for that they used Terry Cade. Terry Cade was the double that was being used. Really good double. Check out the photograph here. Really very good. Particularly in a movie situation, you'd be struggling to tell the two apart. Then he moves on to different projects. He moves on to Days of Thunder. Days of Thunder, was it 1990? Big car race picture. And of course, what's the best thing to do? Well, you get car race guys in. There's Scott Wilder from a stunt background. He's doing some driving for him. Tom Elliott is doing some driving for him. A guy called Greg Sachs, and Chick Bernard, who was a real race car driver at the time in that type of environment. So and did do a lot of his own driving. Don't get me wrong, but majority of his own driving. This is long before pods on top of the vehicle, so the actor can be seen on the camera, but the driving is done upstairs. So he was doing a great deal of his own driving. Far and away, another good example of a big, lavish production over a number of countries. And in Ireland, particularly, Greg Powell was the coordinator over there. Nick Gillard was brought in to double for Tom. Tom rides, not to the same ability that Nick Gillard rides, possibly. And on the strength of that, that was the reason for that. He did a lot of his own fight work in that picture. He has a fight with Carl Cefalio in that movie. There's a bare-knuckle fight takes place, and if you read Carl's book, which I should put a link down there, but there's a picture of Carl's book here. If you read that, there's a great piece in there about fighting Tom. And then on to another picture called The Firm. The Firm was 1993, and this started a long relationship with a stuntman who was to double him for many, many years. The guy's Keith Campbell. Keith Campbell was Tom's major double for a bunch of pictures over the next 10 years, maybe. Certainly over the next 10 years, I would say. And certainly The Firm, you remember there's a great scene in The Firm, apart from driving bits and pieces, but there's a great scene where he's jumping from the window of a building down to some boxes below. That's Keith doing all of that. Interview with a Vampire, which was the next picture after that. Again, back to UK and back with Greg Powell. And again, Nick Gillard is the guy who doubles him. You remember those amazing fire sequences, just spectacular. Well, that was another very good example of Tom being doubled for real. There was no way that you could afford to get into a situation where you could have your actor in that much heat and that much fire and be safe. Keith then goes on to double him on Mission Impossible. Again, yes, he's done a great deal of the stuff himself, but bear in mind, this is long before CGI as we understand CGI, and he was on top of a train. It was a wind train. It was a train that was in almost like a wind tunnel, I suppose, if you will. And he was wired. He was on top of this train. So there's an awful lot of stuff he was doing. But for the actual stunt moments, Keith Campbell doubles him. Doubles him again in Mission Impossible 2, which was a couple of years later. He was also doubled on. Now, Mission Impossible 2, here's another thing. There are interviews. There are interviews with Tom at that time. I'm not having a go at the bloke, but I just think it's important to mention when questioned that it wasn't all you. There's no harm in that, surely. He was doubled by Keith Campbell. People know this. There's a terrific car chase sequence between Tom and Tandy Newton in that movie. Tom does some of the driving, some of it is they've put do you remember the car spinning? They spin the car. I think that was put onto a device and spun. But most of that driving, majority of the driving in that scene was done by Corey Eubanks for Tom Cruise, so you can't afford to not mention that. I don't think anyway. Jimmy Roberts was also responsible for some of the work on the motorcycles. Jimmy's a motorcycle guy, and the movie relies on a big motorcycle sequence. And Tom, all right, as good as he may be on a bike, he's no Jimmy Roberts. And on the strength of that, that is where this action sentiment comes from. It's got to be followed through. And there are interviews with Tom at the time. Hey, you do an awful lot of your own stunt work in this movie. Yes, I do, he says. And, you can't just say, yes, I do, when you don't. I know it's important to as the star of the movie, and John Woo directing this movie, and John Woo expects a great deal from his actors. But there are lines. You can't just sail across those lines. There are lines there in the sand for a reason. Do you do your own stunts, yes or no? Well, no, on this occasion. Well, that's then let somebody know who did. So you go from there, a full-on, all-action, jiggery-pokery picture, to Vanilla Sky, which is a very psychological picture, but again, doubled by Keith Campbell. Minority Report, again, sci-fi, science fact, as the case may be. But again, doubled by Keith. Very important to remember, you know, these stunt guys, they are the ones doing the job. They are the ones putting their life on the line, if you will. Let's use that as a phrase. But it's important to understand where these boundaries are. So, and once you remember where those boundaries are, what was it Clint Eastwood used to say in that movie? Man's got to know his limitations. Exactly. That's exactly it. You have to know where your lines are drawn. And even though, you know, you are the biggest thing at the box office since sliced bread, you just can't go, today, lads, I'm going to do all the action. Not unless it's worked through completely. Now, Keith Campbell, a very successful double for him, and again doubled him on Goldmember, Austin Powers Goldmember. And there were some marvellous moments in that picture. Jack Gill did an awful lot of that pre-title sequence, of course, where Tom appears, is all directed by Jack Gill. Then we have a change of individual, we have a change of staff, because the next action picture that Tom does is a movie called The Last Samurai, which I think is one of his finest pictures. If you haven't seen it, I would advise you to go and see it. It's an absolutely terrific picture. And Keith wasn't available for that picture for whatever reason, so they had brought in another double, Nick Powell, the stunt coordinator there. And the double on this picture was, again, another one that would stay with Tom for pretty much the rest of his career. Casey O'Neill. Casey O'Neill is the guy who takes over the mantle as Tom Cruise's stunt double. Now, this movie, lots of sword work. Tom's very good with choreography. And so remembers the choreography, so that's not an issue. Also, rides a bit, but again, there are situations where you don't need to put your actor in that situation. So consequently, you get him doubled, and Casey able to ride horses in battle sequences and falling from horses, etc., etc. Working from that right the way through, Collateral, another great example of Casey O'Neill at work, jumping from one side of the tracks to the other. You remember that? Casey O'Neill. Robert Nagel was another stunt double for Tom on that picture. Possibly some driving. Again, War of the Worlds, that's Casey. Mission Impossible 3 is Casey. Valkyrie is Casey O'Neill and Jimmy Roberts. Again, more motorcycling. Night and Day is Casey O'Neill and Jimmy Roberts. And then comes Ghost Protocol, which kind of changes everything. He is still doubled, and I want to make this very clear. He still has Casey as his stunt double. He also has Martin Ivanov as a driving double on this, who's an exceptional Russian stuntman, a fabulous, fabulous individual, and an incredibly talented human being. So, for because there's that big motorcycle sequence, right? So you've got all of that taking place. And you've got Martin doing some driving and Casey doubling. Now, he does a lot of the stuff himself. But what you have to remember is that it is tested to the hilt beforehand. So then, new stunt coordinator on the picture as well, in Wade Eastwood. And Wade gave an interview. I'm going to get it up here. Take the specs off of this because I can't read with my glasses on. He gave an interview to For Him magazine. I think it's For Him magazine. And if I may, I'm going to read this to you, and I'll put it up on the screen so you can read along. And it goes like this. From a safety standpoint, you have to be sure that the risk is not too great. When we're doing stunts with Tom, we're not just talking about a fast pull away. This is levels that require a lot of talent, more than I would say any other actor has. He's almost to the point where he is dangerously good. The fact is he's an incredible actor, and this skill set is more than others have, which almost makes it dangerous in itself, because he wants to do everything. It's just not logical to assume that he can also be world champion motorcycle rider when there just aren't enough hours in the day. You are never cutting away from Tom. I think that helps bring the audience to a whole new level, because they know they're not being cheated. He is with you the whole way, and it isn't computer generated. It isn't a computer generated piece of action. Now, from the stunt coordinator's point of view, and this is pretty groundbreaking, to decide. And this is not a decision that Wade Eastwood has come to easily, because obviously Tom is now executive producer. So he's gone from being the actor who we can't afford to lose on this production because, to being the individual making a great many of those decisions on a day-to-day basis as the executive producer. And he, in conjunction with Wade and with the director, has said, I can do this. Not only can I do this, but you could put a camera here and the audience will absolutely know that it's me. There is no chance that there's going to be face replacement or anything of this nature. It's very clearly me. And the audience will believe the character is actually doing the stuff that we're throwing at him. So you go, okay. On the strength of that then changed everything. Because the movies that follow this, Jack Reacher, Oblivion, Edge of Tomorrow, all have doubles. Again, Casey O'Neill, Jimmy Roberts. Edge of Tomorrow is Christopher Gordon. But they are all doing a great deal of it before Tom actually does it himself. Rogue Nation is probably the greatest example of this, because there are some extreme moments of action in this picture. And it throughout Tom's career, he has kind of, particularly after this, once the Ghost Protocol thing happened, it's a case of pushing the boundary and him to decide we can go further, we can go bigger, we can go better. And yeah, he puts himself in a lot of very, very tricky situations that I guarantee if you threw a stick and hit a bunch of actors, none of them would want in a million years to go anywhere near what he does. But he's got to the stage now, still an actor, remember, but the stunt coordinators are saying, this guy's really good. He's very good at doing what he does. And, he's a different kind of actor, different level, because he's prepared to do X, Y, and Z to get it right. Hanging on the side of an aeroplane when it's taking off is something that is unbelievable to look at. You look at that on screen and you react the same way that Benji does, that Simon Pegg does in that picture, when he realises that he's on the outside of the plane and he can't open the door, and all of a sudden you have a moment where that's the actor there, and he is actually on the outside of that aircraft as it takes off. Lunacy. I mean, genuine lunacy, and it could have been filmed in so many different ways. And face replacement, I got to the stage where it was really very good. I mean, very good. And I'm not entirely convinced the audience would have had to have had that, had to have that moment where the actor was right outside. But that's Tom. He does the takeoff. And I heard a lovely phrase at the time from somebody who had been on the set and said, well, no, he was safe as houses, he was tied on. I said, well, yeah, the plane could have crashed, though. Oh, well, yeah, the plane could have crashed. Yes, that's true. You just can't. I genuinely don't think there's any need for him to be there. And yet, it's one of the greatest moments in the movie. And similarly, in the previous one, you have the tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. And there's a couple of terrific photographs of Tom sat on top of it. There's also a great number of photographs of Casey O'Neill sat on top of it. Nobody ever gets to see those very often. But Casey was his double, and running around the top of the Burj Khalifa and doing all of that initial testing, that's Casey's job. Casey goes up there, he makes sure that everything is safe and sound. He makes sure that every single knot and every single clip and everything is to his standard. Working with Greg Smers. Greg Smers was the second year director coordinator on that. And to go along and for that section there and say, yep, Tom, it's okay, you can do this. So there's sections of it where he does it. And again, does it very convincingly. But it's certainly out of many people's comfort zone. So from Mission Impossible Rogue Nation onwards, it's been a similar setup. It's been Casey O'Neill, who has been there constantly the whole time. Jimmy Roberts, other guys brought in from time to time. And again, there's Jimmy Roberts is a motorcycle man, and there's a big chase in Rogue Nation, right? Tom does do some of the riding of the bike. I'm not going to dispute that. But there are sections where you just physically can't do that. And he will be in a rig. He'll be sat in a rig, and he will be leaning the bike to one side, leaning the bike to the other way. Camera positions are such, camera quality is such that you can pick up a great deal of stuff on very, very good GoPros these days, or cameras that are small enough to create crystal clear image. But there are some bits and pieces that you just can't happen. For instance, and here's a good example, Rick English is the guy, if you remember, on that motorcycle chase, and he high-sides the bike and then explodes. Behind Tom, in shot, Tom's on a rig. I mean, he's not riding that motorcycle at all. He rides motorcycles, yes, he does. But it is implausible to have the actor on a motorcycle on his own and a stuntman doing a very, very precise piece of action in the background, and for any actor to be in the right place at the right time to get that caught. And so consequently they will have a rig. Tom will be on a motorcycle, which will be in a rig, which will allow movement both ways. He can go with it into the corners, he can lean, he can do that looking thing, which you just don't do on a motorcycle anyway, but he can do all of that in frame and get away with it. And that's how they do it. So, yes, he does do some motorcycle work. He does a great deal of work on that picture, and he is incredibly, incredibly talented as a motorcyclist. But not in a million years is he allowed to get away with certain shots that he gets away with. I also think that it's important that we should look at Mission Impossible Fallout, because there was a lot of fallout regarding a couple of accidents that happened on set. And again, the question is around, should these accidents have happened? If it was a stunt performer, we wouldn't have known about it, because it would simply, they'd have found somebody else and they'd have moved on. Firstly, we'll look at the roof sequence, and this is where, of course, he fractured or broke his ankle jumping from one building to another. Now, as you will see from the footage, he is wired. He is wearing a wire. There's a safety wire there. He has a harness on underneath his costume, and he has to get from one side of the building to the other. He is to hang on to the other side of the building. He's never going to make that gap, but he is to jump and to hang on and then climb up and do exactly what he's supposed to do in the film. problem is that when he hits the other side, his foot is flat, and he hits the wall on the other side flat because of the movement that he's done to give himself added propulsion. You ever watch long jumpers when they're doing their jumps on meetings and the Olympics and Commonwealth Games? You see them rotating through the air to try and get as much distance as possible. And here, similar exercise, that safety wire is going to allow him to not fall. So he's not going to drop to his death. He is going to, because that's been tested. And so that's all in place. But what happened was the distance that he's got to, and of course he's possibly over-rotated a bit, and he's left his foot flat against the wall as he's hit. And of course it's done that and snapped it back. So there is a moment at the end of that where there's a camera position from the front. Of course all the cables and the wires have been taken out with CGI. But there is a moment where he grabs hold, he looks down, and you can see the pain all over his face. And then he climbs up and hobbles past the camera, which they keep in the film. Now, again, the question, did it need to be done by him? Personally, no. I don't believe it did. Many people say, it does. The producers of the movie, Tom included, the director of the movie particularly, Tom obviously, because he wants to do as much as he possibly can and wants the audience to believe that he's the character. But there is a massive safety issue here. There's a health and safety issue which I think is staring everybody in the face. But the problem is that because of the nature of the character, because of the nature of the individual, the actor and executive producer, I think that there's a great deal more pressure possibly on Wade Eastwood in this instance to, create an extra blanket of safety around the star. Now, if that have been one of the stunt guys who was testing, of course, they, as I said before, that tested and tested and tested. He's not just going to go out there and run and jump from one building to the other. It is tested rigorously. So if one of them had have injured themselves, they just get somebody else to do it. Because everybody knows, as a stunt professional, you're going to get a knock. You're going to get injured. You accept that. It's part of the course. And they are there to prevent accidents like this happening. And if accidents do happen, well, they have to come up with a plan B. And often the situation with actors injuring themselves is, in the old days, it closes down production. You've got your main actor who is injured and he's in effectively every scene, right? Like Bond movies, like Mission Impossible pictures, where you've got the lead actor almost in every scene. What do you do? Do we shut production down? Yeah, we're going to have to shut production down. And that means that, timings aren't met, deadlines aren't met, budgets aren't met, wages aren't paid. I mean, there's a number of different things all dominoed off the other. An instance many moons ago was with Vic Armstrong. Of course, famously on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Harrison Ford had to go off and have some sort of operation in the... he was filming in the UK. Had to go to the States to have an operation. Was it a back operation or something? I forget what it was. He went, and because Vic is so similar physically, Spielberg said, well, it's okay. I mean, if we can get away with it, we'll use a Vic. And Vic was used in close-up on a number of occasions. Inside the mine, there's a number of sequences there where he swings from one side to the other, and it's very clearly Vic in the foreground. It's not they're not hiding it in any way, but the action, everything else around it, you don't notice it so much. Nowadays, we've got bags full, buildings full of CGI. That means that you maybe don't need to have the actor's face front and centre. And could this have been prevented? Yeah. I think it could have been prevented. And I think that it's a shame that it has come to this. The second thing, of course, to talk about is there was a second incident when the helicopter takes off. There's a bag underneath the helicopter which goes up, and he grabs the rope and he climbs up the rope. Now, again, in the old days, what would have happened is you'd have had the stuntman doing all of that. The actor would have been called into the studio, would have done 5 feet off the floor with the background or the plate or the CGI as it is now in the background, the projection. But that isn't the case anymore. So he climbs the bag, again, wired on. All the cabling, all the safety wiring is inside the chopper. Right. Normally, you've got a big space to allow your cables to go up and down to a point over here. They're inside the chopper. Very, very small space. Mark Wolf is flying in the front, and all the action's happening in the back. Wade Eastwood is in the back. Wade Eastwood is leaning out of the back because he has to give visual cues to Tom climbing up. So the scene is that Tom climbs up and then goes and then grabs on. Well, of course, what he did was, they're 1,200 feet up, I think they were, and he's hitting a bag. He's got to fall 40 feet and hit the bag below, and he hit it for real. But one occasion, hit it and then missed. I suppose he's supposed to hit it, give it a glancing blow, and then try and grab it on the way past. And of course, what happened on one of the takes was he hit the bag and then rolled clean off it completely and ended up dangling below the bag. But because of the way in which the positioning was and the camera angles were, when it was being filmed from elsewhere, you couldn't see him, and it gave the impression that he'd gone. They'd lost him completely. So, all of these things are just, as entertaining as the pictures are, I don't know. It's alarming for me. I find it alarming. I tell you the other thing. Is it the same movie? It is the same movie. The Paris chase, the motorbike chase around Paris. He's going it now. What they've done here, cleverly, they've upped the ante as far as ongoing traffic is concerned. So when he is on the bike, when he is actually on that bike and going towards traffic, it's not traffic, it's CGI traffic. That's what they've got coming around him. Not, and I've looked at this time and time. They might have one car, but majority of that traffic coming towards him. When Tom's on the bike, it's CGI traffic coming towards him. So that's an open road he's riding through at speed. Admittedly, he's a fan of bikes. He knows bikes. He rides bikes. And again, he's producer on the movie. So you want to ride a motorbike? Okay, cool, fine, go ahead. But let's do the best we can. And so they take out the elements. When I saw it in the cinema the first time, I thought, what? He's riding against the flow of traffic. And riding, you see that in movies, in cars or motorcycles, and it's not just a simple case of, hoping that everything works out. That has to be worked out to the last detail. You're going to come along here, you're going to come towards this vehicle, this guy here, you can only go at this speed, you cannot change. You can change because the distance between here and here, that's up to you. But when you get here, you're going to go left. What, my left? Yes, your left. No, not your left. He's going to go right. So everybody needs to, and it's all worked out with the cars. Little toy cars, it's all worked out, and everybody needs to know exactly where they're going to be. Right, so you're going to do this, you're going to do that. It's very complicated. Now, to give Tom added issue or added responsibility as far as that's concerned, by giving him the motorcycle, by giving him the speed, and then by giving him, he's good with fight choreography. I'm not going to, I've said that before. However, there are moments where you just can't mess about with this stuff. So CGI traffic, fine, makes a great deal more sense. But again, I've never seen anything that's I've never known anything. I've looked at some of the behind the scenes bits and pieces and all the other stuff, and nobody's ever said, "Oh, we put some CGI traffic in there to make it a bit simpler." Why not? Just tell us. We know. We can see. I just don't want that. And people had said to me in the past about, well, Tom, he's very good, and he wants to he is effectively a stuntman. And a lot of stunt people will say this. Wade Eastwood himself has said he's good enough. He's different level. He's not a stuntman. Yeah, he's good enough, but he's not a different stuntman. People making comparisons between him and Jackie Chan. You can't do that. Jackie is a stuntman. That's his job. He has been a stuntman for many, many, many years. Now, he is an actor, but first and foremost, he is always a stuntman, which is why the movies that he makes, the fights that he has, the stunts that he does are based around stuntmen and the safety of. And they really do make it look unbelievable. And occasionally, some of those shots don't go according to plan, but it looks amazing, so they're going to keep it in the picture. That was Hong Kong cinema. That is Hong Kong cinema. It still does that now, but they have lots of... You've seen that video that Jackie Chan has about, how he makes movies, how he understands fights, how he understands props, how falls, all that sort of stuff. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's on the channel. But I wanted to add that in because I think it's important to do so. There are occasions, and this is a great film to look at, where I think the boundaries were pushed just a touch. They've pushed it maybe too far. They're expecting a great deal of him. And again, in this new movie that's coming up, well, he's riding motorcycles off cliffs and base jumping. He did a free fall parachute jump in the last movie. Again, you didn't need at night. You didn't need to do it. Doesn't need to do it. It can just CGI. Surely you have to use it to the best of your ability. There's that, or really concerning yourself with the life of the actor. And I don't think that anybody wants to be in that type of situation. It genuinely concerns me that it is expected almost that if this individual, this guy or this guy, are in a movie, they must do their own stunts. There has to be a line drawn between stunts and action. I'm perfectly happy with somebody doing as much action as they are available to do or able to do under the supervision of the stunt coordinator. And if the script says, oh, he does this, he does that, there has to be a way around it of doing it. You cannot afford to put that actor in harm's way. Of course, when the actor is the executive producer going, I'm going to do this and you're not going to stop me. Okay. But, okay, in that case, fine. But there are other ground rules here, Let's not work on the basis that as the press keep going, he does his own stunts, he does this, he does all his own stunts, he does his own stunts. Yeah, from time to time, but they've tested and worked out and he's doubled. Oh, it's a funny old world, really, isn't it? Incidentally, did you know that he's only ever been credited as a stunt member once in his entire career? You know what the movie was? American Made. American Made. He is listed in the credits, not only in the main credits as an actor and a producer as well, I think, but also in the stunt credits as a stunt pilot for a Cessna and another make or model of aircraft. Why? Because he flies these planes. He has, as you probably know, he has his own fleet of lunacy planes. I mean, he's got all manner of, he's got commercial license, he's got this license, he's got that license. A question quite recently came up on a chat show about whether he actually has a driving license. I'm not entirely convinced he does. But he has all of these licenses, and he was listed as a stunt pilot in that picture because there was stuff that only he could do. Now, you are putting yourself on a very, very different level when you get to a situation where you start as an actor, not only as an actor, but as this actor being credited as a stunt pilot for other, presumably there is a sequence, and I haven't seen the movie for a long time, but I know there is a chase sequence in some shape or form. He is flying one plane, another plane is chasing him, and I'm guessing that the other plane must do a number of manoeuvres that possibly the pilot wasn't that equipped to do, or had experience in doing, and Tom said, I'll do it. And Tom's gone and done it. Now, we come full circle, because the movie that people are talking about at the moment is Top Gun, and he ticks boxes, doesn't he? Rides a motorcycle? Yep, well, we know he does that. And I would have thought, and certainly looking at the footage of that, I would say that a great deal of that is him doing it all himself. The fighter pilot stuff, well, I don't know. Now, I know that he has a license to fly that type of aircraft, and I know that I think he owns one of them or two of them from the first movie. So he's a big fan, a freak, if you will, of aeronautics and the technology. But I was under the impression, and this is me, but again, Casey O'Neill's the coordinator, so I dare say he will tell us later on down the line. I'd like to speak to Casey and maybe confirm a few bits and pieces. But I was under the impression that a lot of those planes that were used were had the pilot at the front and the passenger at the back. And the passenger shots are the ones that you're getting when they're doing all this in the cockpit, and they're banking the plane, rolling the plane, and doing all of the dialogue. So, but I mean, being in those planes alone, because a great many of those shots are done for real. I don't think there's any studio shots in there whatsoever. There might be one or two, but the majority of it is all done for real in a plane, and that's some job, that really is. So, hats off to everybody who's been in connection with the movie, and I'm sure it'll be a huge success. Mr. Faltermeyer is back. I was a big fan of the soundtrack the first time round. So Harold Faltermeyer is back. He's brought with him, he's brought a Hans Zimmer with him, who I think's won enough lately. But yes, he's brought him back as well to do some bits and pieces. And the fabulous Lady Gaga has a single, I believe. So Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away were the singles from the first movie. Then Gaga has a single from this, and I'm sure it'll be a huge success. It's huge fun to do, but I also want to bear in mind, and again, the press for this movie has surrounded a great deal of him doing his own stunts, and this is the point that we made at the start of this. Is that why does it take a movie or an individual like this to suddenly start shining a light on the stunt community? And what it's doing, it's almost giving it a negative twist. What it's almost saying is, look, well, yeah, he's the actor and he does these amazing movies. He does all his own stunts, So when somebody further down the line says, oh, I was Tom's stunt double on this and that and the other, and they'll go, really? Because he says he did it all himself. No. What we did was, and of course nobody believes it. And that's often the case. So, I just wanted to bang the invisible gong and say, look, just for a moment, I know there are many, many millions of people out there who will go, no, Tom Cruise does all of his own stunts. Yes, nowadays he does a great deal more than possibly he should do. As far as I'm concerned, maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned with the whole thing, but as far as I'm concerned, he shouldn't be doing half the amount of things that he does. But from an audience, and from a director, and from a studio, and from a producing point of view, they're all going, we love it, the star, that's his face on the screen, he's actually on that plane, he's in the plane, he's doing this, he's actually doing it for real, oh my God, how fantastic. I don't know. For me, it's too much. For an audience, they don't care, but what they do care about is column inches. And when they start reading stuff in the papers and on social media about how marvellous he is because he does all his own stunts, I think we have to draw the line. And somebody has to jump in and go, no, wait. Let's just get the facts sorted out. First, he does do a great deal of stuff, but he doesn't do all of his own stunts because he has stunt doubles. And they have been doubling him for the last 40 plus years. So I think that's absolutely essential. So on the strength of that, that's me. That's the case for the prosecution. And we rest under the circumstances. So I just wanted to throw that in as an added bits and PC bonus. Further down the line, there'll be more exciting things happening here on the couch, some of which I just can't tell you about. But there will be discussions like this, and we'll go into detail with all manner of different movies and genres and individuals. We're coming back with Bond not too long from here, so hang on to your seat. There's going to be a... what's the word I'm looking for? Retrospective? Maybe it's a retrospective of action in the Daniel Craig movies leading up to No Time to Die. But again, we are looking from an action point of view, and the fact the box office turnover and all of that has nothing to do with it. It's purely action. So that's going to happen in the not too distant future, and I hope you will be able to join me for that. Until then, bye for now.